of the Secretary of State for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, with a remit over reality TV and over Channel 4, she was on a show which was broadcast on Channel 4 called Tower Block of London. And in that show, she claimed, it was a show about poverty, she lived with a person called Rena Spain, and she claimed that the person she was living with was not real, and that her sons were actors.
I'm just curious.
But then I discovered later they were actually actors.
Oh, were they? I did not know.
What, the MPs or the...
No, the people in. So the Channel 4 production, actually.
It was, yes.
And so the parents of some of the people, of the boys in that programme, actually came here to have lunch with me and contacted me to tell me actually they were in acting school and that they weren't really living in a flat and they weren't real...
A headline for tomorrow.
Yeah, they're actually actors.
Now, Love Productions said that it thought this was rubbish. Channel 4 thought it was rubbish. The DCMS committee thought it was rubbish. In other words, all of them thought that Nadine Dorries had not told the truth and had used parliamentary privilege to besmirch not only an individual who had no right to answer back, but also Channel 4, which she was trying to privatise at the time, to traduce Channel 4's reputation. Later on, Nadine Dorries claimed that the person she was talking to was a homeless person. It doesn't really work. She left it for a very, very long time before she finally said that, but that was after she had stopped being a minister. When Nadine Dorries resigned in the coattails of Boris Johnson, When Nadine Dorries resigned on the coattails of Boris Johnson, when Boris Johnson resigned, and she didn't take up her position again under Liz Truss, she effectively stopped being the minister for the DCMS. Not that she'd done very much during her time as minister. Now, that meant that, as far as the DCMS was concerned, there was no need to refer her to the Privileges Committee because she was no longer a minister and was no longer endangering that ministry. Now, that's important. If she had remained a minister, they would have referred her, and they made this very clear in a letter to the Speaker of the House of Commons, because telling lies in the House of Commons, we know, is wrong, and a minister is expected to come back and correct the error. This was the whole issue with Boris. Telling lies in a committee is equally wrong, and a minister should come back and correct the error at the first opportunity. Nadine Dorries simply refused to do that, and it was only in the last few days, before the letter was dealt with by Lindsay Hoyle, that she said, "Oh, I spoke to a homeless person." Now, Nadine Dorries might get away with that. She clearly hadn't corrected the error that she had made with any speed. And the correction that she made is simply glitter, smoke and mirrors. However, that might be enough to get her off the hook. Now, in the meantime, she's been given the offer of a peerage, which she wants to defer. That in itself is bizarre. John Nicolson, one of the MPs who sits on the Digital Culture, Media and Sport Committee, was concerned that even if she was no longer a minister, she should be seen by the Privileges Committee because of this referral to the House of Lords, and because it was questionable whether or not somebody with her integrity should sit in the House of Lords. He wrote to the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, and then Lindsay Hoyle replied and said actually he was not going to refer the matter, and Nicolson was concerned.
You are following the case of Nadine Dorries, the former Culture Secretary, and the fact that she appeared before the Commons Culture Committee, on which I sit, and gave false testimony to it. Now, the committee published an excoriating report, and I don't think that Nadine Dorries, because of that, should go to the House of Lords in Boris Johnson's resignation honours list. So I sent a copy of the report to Mr. Speaker, and he's responded, and I thought I should update you on what he said. He says that he's considered my letter, but he's decided to take no further action and not to refer Nadine Dorries to the Privileges Committee. In other words, she'll suffer no consequences for what she's done.
The Speaker of the House of Commons was indignant that Nicolson had gone public about the letter that he had written rejecting the invitation to send Dorries to the Privileges Committee. This was, in fact, the second time in a matter of a few weeks that Speaker Hoyle has acted oddly in one of his pronouncements.
When she was the Secretary of State for DCMS. The Honourable Member for Hoyle, South and Perthshire subsequently wrote to me asking for precedence for a complaint of a breach of privilege, as was his right. I declined to do so since the bar for such a complaint is high. The House should only take action when essential in order to provide reasonable protection for the House, its members or its officers from improper obstruction. I note the committee itself, of which the Honourable Gentleman is a member, has said, had Miss Dorries remained the Secretary of State, driving policy of selling the Channel, we may have sought referral to the Privilege Committee. But as her claims have not been inhibited, the work of the committee, and she is no longer has a position of power over the future of Channel 4, we are instead publishing this report to enable the House and its members to draw its own conclusion. So I consider it appropriate to respect the committee's assessment of the situation. Correspondence on matters of privilege is private. Indeed, had to grow to great lengths to ensure that members can write to me in confidence on any matter, knowing their communication will remain private. Expect the same courtesy in my replies. The Honourable Member has seen fit to give a partial and biased account of my letter on Twitter, and I await his apology. I gave the Honourable Member notice that I will be raising this matter at this time, but I do stress it is not the way we should be doing business in this House. Honourable Member for Hoyle and Perthshire.
Mr. Speaker, as you've
The floor back.
Mr. Speaker, as you've just explained, the Commons Culture Committee in which I sit published a unanimous cross-party report about the testimony of the Right Honourable Member and the testimony she gave to the committee, and there are now considerable public interest in what should happen next. I want to put on record, Mr. Speaker, that I deplore social media pylons against you or indeed anyone else. I've been on the receiving end of them, and they are exceedingly unpleasant. But could I ask for guidance on what I and other members should tell their constituents about integrity in politics in this context? If someone misleads a committee, what should happen next?
Can I just say, integrity is that, first of all, printing the letter, but only half the letter is not integrity. In fact, far from it. It misled the people of this country. It certainly put me in bad light with the people of this country, and I don't expect that to happen in an impartial speaker. So if that was an apology, I don't think it was very good. David Davis.
Mr. Speaker, in following on from that, honourable members of this House have certain strict duties on them. First, there is a duty of upholding the institutions of this House. Clearly, in breaching the confidentiality of the Speaker's private correspondence, the member for Hoyle and South Perthshire has knowingly broken that rule. And frankly, for that, if that was an apology, that was not sufficient for that alone. But we also have a duty to tell the truth. Now, in his public pronouncements, he implicitly criticised you, Mr. Speaker, for not referring the DCMS Secretary of State to the Privileges Committee. But you were simply following the convention of agreeing with the DCMS Select Committee, of which he is a member. And when they decided not to refer, there was no minority report from him. There was not even a vote against from him. It was a unanimous vote. So what he was trying to do, Mr. Speaker, was to blame you by his partial release of his letter, and he was leading the public to believe that somehow you made this decision against the wishes of the committee. The rules of this House do not allow me to assert whether I view the misleading of the public as deliberate. So the House can make its own judgment on that. But this miserable half a...
It is extraordinary that the Speaker allowed David Davis to speak at that point. David Davis then tabled a motion, and he has engineered it so that John Nicholson is now facing the Privileges Committee, not Nadine Dorries. This is extraordinary cronyism at best and possibly corruption at worst. It is extraordinary, and the Speaker is up to it to here. Now, there may be a perfectly reasonable explanation. I don't see it at the moment. I would love to hear that explanation. I think everybody is worth a second chance. I think everybody is worth a hearing. But we're not hearing anything here. The Speaker is silencing stuff rather than speaking. I would like to know what right mother of five Rena Spain has to answer the scurrilous allegations or the hints that it was she who was the person who had lunch with Nadine Dorries. It was she who blew the whistle about the inauthenticity of that reality TV program. We know reality TV programs are not authentic. We know they are often staged, but this is not the time for that argument. And what Nadine Dorries seems to have done is to besmirch somebody else's reputation, and she's got away with it with the connivance, it seems, of this Speaker. This is extraordinary, that somebody who tries to blow the whistle ends up in the same dock as the person he was trying to get into the dock. It is extraordinary that he is brought to the Privileges Committee and Nadine Dorries is not. And Nadine Dorries, meanwhile, sails into the House of Lords. Quite extraordinary.